Grace Kelly lived out the ultimate fairy tale, transforming from a Hollywood starlet into a real-life princess. When she married Prince Rainier of Monaco, the world watched in awe as she traded her glamorous career for a golden crown and a place in one of Europe's most iconic royal families. But beneath the dazzling surface of her royal romance lay a story filled with challenges, sacrifices, and a high cost that only Grace herself could understand. Born into a wealthy and prominent family, Grace Patricia Kelly's early life in Philadelphia was far from the glamorous image she would later project. Surprisingly, Grace wasn't the golden child of the Kelly clan. With three stronger, more confident siblings, Grace was the shy, sickly one who always felt overshadowed. She was slim, quiet, and often described as timid, blending into the background of her family's larger-than-life personalities. This sense of being the odd one out fueled her vivid imagination, and Grace began escaping into daydreams where she was the princess of her own story, a dream that would eventually become her reality, albeit with a twist she could never have foreseen. Despite growing up in privilege, Grace wasn't immune to the pressures of her high-achieving Catholic family. Her parents, particularly her father, John Kelly, a successful businessman and Olympic gold medalist, expected nothing short of perfection from their children. The Kelly household was a mansion filled with luxuries, but it was also a place where discipline and high expectations reigned supreme. Grace, however, had a streak of rebellion that set her apart. While her siblings excelled in sports, Grace was drawn to the arts, much to her parents' dismay. She dated bad boys, broke curfews, and, in a particularly bold move, chose acting over the more traditional pursuits her family valued. Her decision to pursue acting sent shockwaves through the Kelly household. While Grace's mother was mildly supportive, her father dismissed the profession outright, once famously declaring it to be a slim cut above streetwalker. For Grace, this disapproval was crushing, but not enough to deter her. Beneath her shy demeanor was a determination that drove her to prove herself, even in the face of harsh judgment from the people whose opinions mattered most. Growing up, Grace Kelly wasn't the glamorous icon we remember today. Far from being considered a beauty, she often wore headscarves and glasses, hiding her slender frame under oversized sweaters. Friends and peers didn't see her as extraordinary. In fact, she was seen as plain and unremarkable. But when Grace stepped into the world of acting, something remarkable happened. Her natural elegance, combined with her fierce dedication to her craft, transformed her into one of the most stunning and captivating actresses of her time. As her face lit up the silver screen, even those who once doubted her beauty were left in awe. It all began when Grace left the comforts of her Philadelphia home for New York City to attend drama school, where she set out to completely reinvent herself. Determined to make an impression, Grace poured her energy into refining every detail of her image. She worked tirelessly on her elocution, crafting a signature accent, soft, rounded, and with a slight British lilt that would become one of her trademarks. Her transformation wasn't limited to her voice. Grace honed her style, elegance, and poise until she became the picture of perfection. When she stepped in front of the camera, the effect was mesmerizing. Grace Kelly had become the kind of woman who could stop conversations and turn heads in any room. By the time she was 20, Grace had fully emerged from her shell, leaving behind the shy schoolgirl she once was. She quickly became a sought-after model, appearing in commercials and magazine spreads that showcased her refined beauty and effortless grace. Even those who had grown up with her were astonished by her transformation. One childhood friend later admitted, "My heavens, that's our Grace?" It was as though she had stepped straight out of a fairy tale. But like many fairy tales, there was a darker side lurking beneath the glamour. Despite her poised demeanor, Grace Kelly was no stranger to breaking the rules. When she moved to Manhattan, her parents insisted she stay at the Barbizon Hotel for Women, a strictly female-only residence designed to keep young women out of trouble. The idea was simple. Structure and supervision would keep Grace on the straight and narrow. But her rebellious streak had other plans. Grace was reportedly known for dancing to Hawaiian music in the hallways and even shocking her fellow residents by performing topless on occasion. This carefree behavior hinted at a side of Grace that was far from the composed persona the world would later see. Yet the real scandal came when Grace started dating someone wildly inappropriate by her family's standards, her college theater director, Don Richardson. Richardson, captivated by her talent and beauty, saw Grace's potential long before the world did. "The camera did more than love her," he once said. "It was insane about her, just like I was." Their relationship was passionate, but it came with complications. When Grace introduced Richardson to her family, it ended in disaster. Her parents, especially her domineering father, disapproved of the match, believing he wasn't good enough for their daughter. Don Richardson, her passionate but ultimately doomed relationship, was just the first in a series of romantic disappointments. Yet while her love life felt stifled, Grace had one thing to hold on to. Her burgeoning career was on the verge of taking off. In 1951, at just 22 years old, Grace was already carving out a name for herself in television, but her heart remained with the theater. She saw it as the nobler pursuit, a stage where her talents could truly shine. That summer, she traveled to Denver to perform in Summer Stock Theater. It was here that Hollywood came calling, offering her the opportunity to star in High Noon, a Western that paired her with one of Tinseltown's most notorious leading men, Gary Cooper. While the role marked her first big break, it also ignited one of the first major scandals of her career. Behind the scenes of High Noon, Grace couldn't resist Cooper's undeniable charm. At the time, Cooper was everything Grace seemed to gravitate toward: authoritative, decades older, and of course married. Their off-screen chemistry turned into a passionate affair, setting the tone for Grace's complicated love life in Hollywood. Cooper himself didn't shy away from gossip, famously describing her as a cold dish with a man until you got her pants down, then she'd explode. While his words were scandalous, they reflected how Grace's outward sophistication masked a fiery and unpredictable side. And as her Hollywood career began to rise, so did the whispers about her love life. Though High Noon didn't earn Grace rave reviews for her performance, it did put her on the radar of some of the most influential figures in the film industry. One such admirer was legendary director John Ford. To him, Grace embodied breeding, quality, and class, qualities that set her apart in an industry full of hopefuls. So, when Gene Tierney had to step down from her role in Ford's upcoming production, Mogambo, Grace was the natural choice to replace her. The sweltering Nairobi set of Mogambo wasn't just the backdrop for an exotic Hollywood adventure. It was also the stage for one of Grace Kelly's most talked-about romances. For Grace, the opportunity to work on this production was irresistible. As someone who came from wealth, she had the luxury of choosing her roles carefully. But this film offered a trifecta she simply couldn't pass up. As she later admitted, Mogambo had three things that interested me: John Ford, Clark Gable, and a trip to Africa with expenses paid. But it wasn't just the allure of working with a legendary director or a free trip to the wilds of Africa that had her excited. Grace had her sights set on the film's suave leading man, Clark Gable, and once the cameras rolled, things got steamy, on and off set. Rumors of an on-set affair between Grace and Gable began swirling almost immediately. The chemistry between the two stars was undeniable, and it didn't take long for whispers of romance to spread beyond the cast and crew. When Grace's mother caught wind of these rumors, she was horrified. Determined to put a stop to what she saw as her daughter's descent into scandal, she flew to Africa to act as an impromptu chaperone. But despite her mother's best efforts, her presence did little to cool the flames of passion between Grace and her older co-star. While Grace never publicly admitted to the affair, she later dropped a now infamous line that left little to the imagination. Reflecting on her time with Gable, she said, "What else is there to do if you're alone in a tent in Africa with Clark Gable?" Grace was undoubtedly captivated by Gable's charm and rugged masculinity. To her, their connection felt like the beginning of something meaningful. However, the feelings weren't mutual, or at least not to the same extent. Gable, who was known for his on-set dalliances, didn't share the intensity of Grace's emotions. She assumed their romance would continue once the film wrapped, naively believing that their on-set spark could translate into a real-world relationship. But when the actors returned to the hustle and bustle of Los Angeles, the dreamlike allure of Mogambo faded. Gable, finding Grace too clingy for his taste, ended things unceremoniously, leaving her heartbroken. While Grace Kelly was nursing her heartbreak over Clark Gable, fate introduced her to someone who would redefine her career, Alfred Hitchcock. Their meeting was nothing short of pivotal, though Hitchcock wasn't immediately captivated by her. Initially, he found her refined elegance almost too perfect, too cold. But it didn't take long for him to see something deeper, a fire smoldering beneath her composed exterior. "She's a volcano covered with snow," Hitchcock famously said, and he became determined to harness that quiet intensity. But Hitchcock's admiration came with a dark edge, as his obsession with control over his leading ladies was no secret. Hitchcock cast Grace as the lead in his 1954 thriller Dial M for Murder, marking the beginning of a professional relationship that would propel her into Hollywood royalty. Unlike some of his other leading ladies, Grace didn't endure Hitchcock's infamous romantic advances, but she wasn't spared from his need for total dominance on set. One scene in particular tested her both physically and emotionally. The sequence in which her character is violently attacked took 5 grueling days to shoot. Hitchcock, ever the perfectionist, pushed for take after take until he achieved exactly what he envisioned. By the time filming wrapped, Grace was left battered and bruised, literally covered in black and blue marks. Despite the physical toll, Grace's experience on set wasn't entirely sour. She had a rather complicated source of comfort to lean on during those difficult days: her co-star, Ray Milland. The two quickly struck up an off-screen romance that turned out to be as dramatic as anything unfolding in front of the camera. Milland, much like Gable, was older, married, and every bit the kind of man Grace was drawn to. Their affair wasn't just passionate, it was messy, leaving a trail of scandal in its wake. Milland's wife, who had been his partner for over 20 years, was devastated when she discovered the infidelity. In a fury, she reportedly threw him out of their home, causing a storm of tabloid headlines and speculation. For a time, it seemed as though Milland was ready to leave his marriage for Grace, but the reality of abandoning his long-established life brought him to a sobering realization. The cost of starting anew with Grace was simply too great. Once Milland realized the staggering cost of a divorce, he backtracked on plans to leave his wife, leaving Grace heartbroken yet again. To make matters worse, the press got hold of their romance, and gossip columnist Hedda Hopper led the charge in dragging Grace's name through the mud. Hopper's scathing columns painted Grace as a nymphomaniac and a homewrecker, fueling a media frenzy that nearly derailed her career. Overnight, the elegant actress who embodied sophistication became a villain in the public's eyes. The whispers grew louder, and Grace found herself labeled as the ultimate temptress, accused of wrecking a marriage and chasing unavailable men. Yet, as damaging as the headlines were, Grace refused to let the media destroy her. She pushed forward, channeling her resilience and charm to reclaim her narrative. Despite her tarnished reputation, she wasn't about to shy away from the same boldness that had brought her this far. Her next major project would give her the perfect opportunity to rise above the chaos and solidify her place in cinematic history. Hitchcock, who had already been captivated by her allure, cast her in Rear Window, a role that further cemented her as his ultimate leading lady. This time, her co-star was the beloved 46-year-old Jimmy Stewart, whose everyman charm was the perfect foil to Grace's icy elegance. It seemed like another potential on-set romance waiting to happen, but this time, Grace kept things strictly professional. That didn't stop Jimmy Stewart's wife, Gloria, from worrying. Gloria was well aware of Grace's reputation for seducing married men, and she wasn't taking any chances. Her paranoia wasn't entirely unfounded. Stewart himself later admitted he had a soft spot for his co-star, describing her presence on set as almost magical. Everybody just sat around and waited for her to come in the morning so we could just look at her, he confessed. Grace's beauty and charm were impossible to ignore, and it didn't take long for Gloria to step in, keeping a watchful eye on her husband throughout the production. When she came across the script for 1954's The Country Girl, she saw it as the perfect opportunity to showcase her depth as an actress. The role of Georgie Elgin, a gritty and emotionally complex character, was unlike anything Grace had played before. It was her chance to break free from the demure, polished role she was known for. There was just one problem. Her studio didn't want to loan her to Paramount for the film. Grace wasn't about to let studio politics stand in her way. In a move as bold as it was brilliant, she delivered a cutting ultimatum. Well, This simultaneous flirtation sparked one of Hollywood's juiciest scandals, fueling whispers that only added to her growing mystique. The night Grace Kelly won an Oscar for her stunning performance in The Country Girl was supposed to be a celebration of her incredible talent. For Bing Crosby, it was also an opportunity for something more intimate. That night, the legendary crooner made his way to her hotel, hoping to find himself in her warm embrace. But when he reached her room, Crosby got a rude awakening. Grace wasn't alone. Sharing her bed was none other than Marlon Brando, the notorious heartthrob who had stolen many hearts in Hollywood, and apparently this time, Grace's as well. Grace Kelly's ability to juggle scandalous affairs while maintaining her pristine public image baffled everyone, including her peers. To the world, she was the epitome of grace and elegance, a wholesome figure untouchable by the whispers of Hollywood gossip. But behind closed doors, Grace had a fiery, untamed side that few saw coming. Even Zsa Zsa Gabor, herself a notorious man-eater, once remarked, "She had more boyfriends in a month than I had in a lifetime. She went to bed with anyone she fancied at the time." Grace's romantic escapades were legendary, yet her reputation remained untarnished. However, when she finally fell deeply in love, the story didn't unfold like a fairy tale. It became a tragedy in the making. Fashion designer Oleg Cassini was utterly captivated by Grace Kelly after watching her in Mogambo. Their connection began as a friendship in California, but it quickly blossomed into something more profound. When Grace left for the south of France to begin filming the iconic To Catch a Thief, she left Cassini a note that would forever change his life. In the note, Grace simply wrote, "Those who love me, follow me." Enchanted and unable to resist, Cassini rushed to France to be by her side. Their romance was a whirlwind of passion and elegance. Cassini later described their time together as the most enchanting days that I've ever had at any time in my life. He was so deeply in love that he proposed to Grace envisioning a life together filled with glamour and devotion. But as blissful as their relationship seemed, neither Grace nor Cassini could predict the chilling turn their love story was about to take. Rumors swirled that Grace had become pregnant with Cassini's child, but had chosen to terminate the pregnancy. If true, the emotional toll of the broken engagement and the abortion must have weighed heavily on her. Yet, Grace carried herself with grace, hiding her sorrow behind a radiant smile as she attended the 1955 Cannes Film Festival. Little did she know that trip would forever change the course of her life. While at Cannes, Grace received an invitation to visit nearby Monaco. There, she was to meet Prince Rainier III, the dashing 32-year-old ruler of the principality. Grace's arrival at the palace was a carefully orchestrated event, complete with photographers to capture the moment she stepped into Rainier's world. The prince welcomed her warmly, giving her a tour of his private zoo and the palace gardens. By the end of her visit, the spark between them was undeniable. But unlike the fleeting romances of her Hollywood days, this connection felt different, more profound, more promising. After leaving Monaco, Grace and Rainier began a secret correspondence. Through their letters, the two grew closer, sharing their thoughts and dreams as they built an intimate bond from afar. Rainier, captivated by Grace's elegance and warmth, was eager to see her again. After spending less than a day together, Rainier asked Grace for her hand in marriage. But this picture-perfect proposal came with a price. Grace, who had endured a string of disappointing romances, had finally found a man who delighted her exacting parents. Rainier was Roman Catholic, had never been married, and was only 6 years older than Grace, a match straight out of a fairy tale. Yet there was one catch. The prince wanted his future wife to leave Hollywood behind. He had no interest in being married to a movie star and expected Grace to give up her career to fully embrace her new royal role. It was an enormous sacrifice, but Grace, ever the dutiful daughter and now deeply in love, agreed. The news of their engagement sent shock waves through Hollywood and beyond. Headlines buzzed with details of the upcoming royal wedding, while Grace prepared to bid farewell to her acting career. But before she could fully step into her new life as Monaco's princess, she had one last commitment to fulfill, completing her final film for MGM. That film was High Society, and it couldn't have been a more fitting swan song. Grace played a high-class debutante on the brink of marriage, a role that mirrored her own life at the time. Throughout filming, she wore her dazzling 10.47 carat Cartier engagement ring, a constant reminder of the life she was about to embark on. Despite her love for acting, Grace had never enjoyed the relentless publicity that came with being a movie star. She later confessed that the constant scrutiny often left her feeling uneasy. However, the Hollywood press was nothing compared to the media circus that surrounded her as she transitioned into royal life. The attention leading up to her wedding and the role she would assume as Princess of Monaco was overwhelming. Every move she made was documented, every detail of her new life dissected by a global audience. Nervous yet determined, Grace entered this glittering, unfamiliar world, unaware of the challenges and dangers that awaited her. When Grace Kelly walked down the aisle to marry Prince Rainier III, she didn't just become royalty, she made fashion history. Her breathtaking wedding dress, designed by Helen Rose, was a masterpiece that captivated the world and later inspired Kate Middleton's iconic gown. The stunning ensemble featured 25 yards of silk taffeta, 100 yards of silk net, and priceless antique rose point lace that showcased intricate detail and timeless elegance. To complete the look, Grace wore a veil adorned with thousands of delicate pearls, each painstakingly sewn by hand. Behind the glamour of her royal wedding was a day fraught with chaos and pressure. The ceremony, meant to be a celebration of love, was overshadowed by voracious paparazzi and enormous crowds that overwhelmed the couple at every turn. What should have been one of the happiest days of their lives became a memory they could barely stand to revisit. Grace and Rainier loathed the chaos of their wedding so much that they refused to even look at the photographs for an entire year. After enduring the frenzied spectacle, the newlyweds escaped to their honeymoon, seeking a brief reprieve from the public eye. But even as she began her new life as a princess, Grace Kelly faced immense challenges. Rainier, acutely aware of Monaco's conservative population, banned all screenings of her films, hoping to distance her from her Hollywood past. For Grace, who had poured her heart into her craft, this decision was devastating. Acting had been her passion and her identity, and the abrupt severance from her career left her feeling adrift. Over time, the loss took a toll on her mental health, and she began to battle bouts of depression. But this wasn't the only struggle she faced behind the walls of the palace. Before marrying Prince Rainier III, Grace was required to undergo a fertility test. Less than a year after their wedding, the couple welcomed their first child, Princess Caroline. Just a year later, Grace gave birth to Prince Albert, fulfilling Rainier's dream of having a son and securing the future of the Grimaldi dynasty. Yet behind the grandeur of royal life, cracks in Grace's marriage began to form. The once glittering romance between her and Rainier dulled as their differences became impossible to ignore. Rainier, often preoccupied with the business of running Monaco, appeared cold and detached, while Grace, with her natural charm and star power, became the face of the principality. She transformed Monaco into a hub for tourism and luxury, drawing global attention and reviving its dwindling economy. Property values soared, and the tiny nation's fortunes turned around, largely thanks to Grace's allure. But while Monaco flourished under her influence, Grace herself began to feel trapped. By 1960, Grace's personal struggles had reached an all-time low. The death of her beloved father left her grieving, and she endured further heartbreak with a series of miscarriages in the years that followed. Adding to her anguish was the stifling control Rainier exerted over her life. While Grace longed to return to acting, a passion that had defined her for so many years, her husband kept her firmly tethered to her royal duties in Monaco. Her creative spirit, once so vibrant, was increasingly suppressed, and Grace sank into depression. 6 years into her marriage, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon. Alfred Hitchcock, the director who had played a pivotal role in Grace's Hollywood success, invited her to star in his upcoming film, Marnie. It was an opportunity Grace had dreamed of, a chance to reclaim a piece of the life she had left behind. The palace even announced her involvement, sparking excitement in Hollywood and beyond. But the dream was short-lived. Within months, Grace was forced to back out of the project. She publicly cited scheduling conflicts and her responsibilities as a mother. But Hitchcock suspected a deeper reason. He believed Monaco's conservative elite had pressured her to abandon the film, unwilling to let their princess return to the screen. Grace Kelly's life as Princess of Monaco may have sparkled on the surface, but behind the palace walls, the fairy tale was far from perfect. The press, relentless in their pursuit of royal gossip, became an ever-present shadow in her life. They didn't just target Grace, they turned their attention to her children, scrutinizing their every move. But perhaps the most painful blow came from the rumors surrounding her husband, Prince Rainier III. Whispers of infidelity swirled, with reports claiming Rainier had several mistresses. While the prince never addressed these allegations, the speculation cast a dark cloud over their marriage. Yet Grace wasn't immune to scandalous whispers herself. One persistent rumor connected her to an ongoing affair with a former co-star. Hollywood, it seemed, wasn't ready to let Grace Kelly go. Many believed she had shared an illicit romance with Cary Grant, her dashing co-star from To Catch a Thief. Some even speculated that their connection endured after Grace became royalty, though these claims were never confirmed. Still, Cary Grant made no secret of his admiration for Grace. In interviews, he openly praised her, calling her the most extraordinary actress ever, and saying, "With all due respect to Ingrid Bergman, I much preferred Grace. She had serenity." For Grant, Grace wasn't just another leading lady. She was his favorite. Yet despite the fond words and lingering rumors, Grace's reality was far less romantic. As she aged, her life in Monaco left her feeling increasingly unfulfilled. In 1981, Grace crossed paths with another royal icon in the making, a young Princess Diana who had just become engaged to Prince Charles. Diana, only 19 at the time, was captivated by Grace's poise and elegance. "She was wonderful and serene," Diana later wrote, "but there was troubled water under her. I saw that." Their meeting at a glittering royal event would take an unforgettable turn when Grace pulled Diana aside for a private conversation in the ladies' restroom. Away from the prying eyes of the press and other guests, Diana confided in Grace, admitting how overwhelmed and alone she felt stepping into royal life. "Don't worry, dear," she told Diana, "it'll only get worse." Her words, though meant as a sobering warning, carried a haunting weight considering the tragedies that would later befall both women. Reflecting on that fateful day, she once said, "Not only did I go through the horrible trauma of losing my mother at a very young age, but I was beside her at the moment of the accident. Nobody can imagine how much I've suffered and still suffer." Rainier, who had stood by Grace as her prince and partner for over 2 decades, never remarried after her death. He remained loyal to her memory until the end of his life, and when he passed away in 2005, he was laid to rest alongside her in the Grimaldi family vault. Grace Kelly's tragic end also cast a shadow over one of her most iconic films, Alfred Hitchcock's To Catch a Thief. In the film, her character Frances shares a famous scene with Cary Grant, where she drives through the winding roads of the French Riviera, narrowly escaping danger. At the time of the film's release, the sequence was celebrated for its tension and elegance. But after Grace's fatal car accident in Monaco, the scene took on an eerie significance. Viewers couldn't help but draw parallels between the movie and her real-life tragedy. The unsettling connection doesn't end there. During the filming of To Catch a Thief, Grace had to perform her own stunt driving, a requirement that made her visibly uneasy. The roads of the Riviera were notoriously treacherous, and Grace reportedly expressed discomfort about navigating them during filming. Yet Grace's life wasn't just marked by tragedy. It was filled with complex relationships and intense rivalries, even before she became royalty. One surprising contender for Prince Rainier's attention was none other than Marilyn Monroe. According to Monroe's friend Aristotle Onassis, she had heard that Rainier was searching for a bride and confidently quipped, "Give me 2 days alone with him." While Monroe's comment was likely made in jest, it highlighted the allure Rainier had, even among Hollywood's brightest stars. But in the end, it was Grace, not Marilyn, who captured his heart and claimed the crown. For all her grace and poise, Grace Kelly's personal life was often tumultuous, shaped by deep insecurities rooted in her upbringing. Friends of the actress, like Dawn Richardson, revealed a darker side to the woman who seemed to have it all. According to Richardson, Grace grew up in a strict, demanding household that left her yearning for love and validation. She was starved for affection because of the family, he explained. She was afflicted with a great sense of emptiness, terrible loneliness, and this was her way of alleviating it. Her string of romances, often scandalous and fleeting, was her attempt to fill that void, seeking the intimacy and approval she never felt growing up. Grace Kelly's life was one of dazzling highs and heartbreaking lows. Behind the beauty, fame, and titles was a woman navigating an unrelenting quest for love and meaning. Her tragic death only deepened the intrigue surrounding her life, leaving behind a legacy that continues to captivate and inspire. But it also serves as a poignant reminder that even the most extraordinary lives are often far more complex than they appear.